Joel, I don't think anybody was surprised that Jordan Spieth won a Masters, and I think he'll probably obviously win several Masters if he continues to play like he did last week in Augusta. But let's break this down here. I mean, in terms of the record-setting nature of this performance, first wire-to-wire winner since 1976, had the 36-hole scoring record. His 16-under mark through 54 was a new mark as well. Even got it to 19 under at one point, which is something nobody had ever done, but he still only won by 4.
Yeah, and it was an incredible performance by Spieth. Obviously, he was the best golfer in the field from beginning to end last week. Just a legendary performance, no doubt. Certainly the scores were low, primarily because of the softer greens. Now, the greens were still fast, but when professionals can hold, mid-irons or hit into par fives and two and have the ball land relatively softly, or not worry about hitting it in the first cut because they're still going to be able to stop it or even spin it back a little bit out of that first cut, because remember, the rough really is not much rough there at all. The guys are going to score low. So Phil and Justin, who tied at 14 under, would have won 72 of the last 78 Masters. I mean, that's just an incredible stat. Like Phil said in his press conference, he's like, if you'd have told me I was going to shoot 14 under here, sitting here on Wednesday before the tournament, I certainly would have taken it. And he played great. Justin played great, but it just wasn't good enough. Jordan Spieth just ran away with it, and it was just an absolute performance for the ages.
So everybody wants to compare this performance to what Tiger did there in '97 when Tiger had his big performance that day. The big difference is the margin of victory. Only 4 shots for Spieth, 12 shots for Tiger Woods. So what was the big difference?
Well, the big difference was that the course this year just played a little bit softer, so that guys were able to hold shots into the green. And Tiger, I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Spieth, but Tiger did it. Yes, the course was longer now. The course was shorter then, but the separation being so great, and then Tiger was so much longer than the rest of the field then, he was able to just completely just separate himself, because the course back then was playing firm with that, the equipment, dated back, 18 years now. He was that much better than the rest of the field, that big of a separation. And with the soft conditions this week, it would have been almost impossible for somebody to run and hide that much further. Spieth was the best player in the field, but a lot of other guys played pretty dang well too.
Let's talk about Tiger. I mean, we had no idea what to expect, and I think expectations were low considering his lack of any tournament experience coming into this event so far this season. And then all of a sudden you look up on the weekend, and he's tied for 5th at one point.
I was surprised. After that 73 on Thursday, he was kind of right about where I thought he was going to be, and then he pulls together that 69-68 back-to-backer on Friday and Saturday, and there was never really a point where I thought he'd contend to win, but you know what? I'm not a Tiger fan, but it was kind of cool to see him, make a little bit of a run at least early on Saturday, especially when he made those 3 birdies to start on Saturday. He looked absolutely fabulous around the greens, particularly his chipping, his pitching and chipping. It was amazing. After it was like he was a completely different player than when he had teed it up at Torrey Pines in Phoenix. His precision and contact on the ball was extremely precise. You could just tell he really had no after effects of the weird, blades and chunks and chili dips that he had even just 2 months ago. It was very evident that he had clearly been working his butt off and practicing, particularly around the greens. And what's weird is he really didn't even putt great. I mean, he certainly made some putts, particularly, I guess, on Friday in that round, a couple of great par putts. But he missed a lot of putts over the weekend, and he'd be the first to tell you that. He still struggled a little bit with his driver and 3-wood, just tee shots in general. But considering where he came from, it was a heck of a step forward for him. So it really was a good little jolt to the tournament too. That certainly helped draw more attention to the tourney.
And then, of course, the infamous chip shot on 9 where he injures his wrist, and according to him, he had to pop a bone back into place, and yet continued the round. I mean, how much did that contribute to his 73 on Sunday?
Well, let's be realistic here. I mean, he had not hit a fairway until that happened. So that was in the 9th hole. So he already teed off when that happened. So he went 0 for 7 because there's 2 par 3s in the front. So 0 for 7 on fairways hit. He was already 1 over par. He was already not playing well. Now, clearly, there was a root there, and we all kind of give Tiger a hard time, rightfully so, in a lot of cases, for injuries and showing that emotion and such on the course. This one really looked like it hurt. He looked like he did hit a root, and wow, I've done that before, and it does not feel good at all. I don't know about the doctor, chiropractic, Tiger Woods part of it, popping the bone back in, but it certainly did look like it hurt, but he was not playing well before then, so his entire round can't be chalked up to the fact that he was injured. Half of it was already over at that point.
Let's talk about Phil Mickelson and Justin Rose. You talked about the score those guys shot. I mean, ordinarily, we're talking about these two guys playing for a playoff, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. At 14 under, I mean, in the clubhouse, like we mentioned, all but 6 Masters ever, they would have won. Just some fabulous golf. Phil being Phil, just suddenly finding his game after really a horrendous 2014 season. Other than the PGA last year, he didn't even contend in a tournament. In fact, the PGA was his first top 10 all year last year. So he went T2 in that, and that's 8 months removed. He hadn't played super great. He'd had some flashes, like at Shell the week before Augusta, where he was actually within one of the lead, and then he gave it away on the weekend. But it's good to see him get it back together. He's driving the ball great. His short game, like usual, was just fabulous. And his putting, just, wow, he made almost everything. He really, really was rolling the ball well. And he had gone back to that older putter and just, I don't know, just found some new confidence. It was fun to watch. And then Justin Rose, yeah, just, again, Rose had a pretty poor season. He was coming off a little bit of a wrist injury and seems to be all healed now. He's hitting the ball great. He had that incredible run at the end of Saturday where he birdied 5 of the last 6 and played solid again on Sunday, and never had a really, really good chance to win on Sunday, but he was right there just in case Jordan Spieth did, make a big number, which Jordan never did. But just some great golf by both of them.
And then another guy who saved his best for last was Rory. And Rory, I mean, 6 under going into the last day, and all of a sudden he birdied 6 out of the last 12 holes, and you just wonder where that was throughout the weekend.
I know, and Rory really, he shot that 66 on Sunday, and I of course, watched every minute of it. He just seemed so ho-hum about it. He never really got charged up. He just kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say he didn't care. It's just like he was so laid back. It just would be nice, wow, to shoot 66 at Augusta National and just kind of be like ho-hum about the whole thing. Really, with Rory, he shot 71 on Thursday, and then on Friday he shot 40 on the front 9. So he's 3 over going into the back 9 on Friday afternoon. Basically, at that point you're thinking, wow, I have to have a good back 9 just to make the cut.
Mm-hmm.
But what does he do? He shoots 5 under on the back 9, and then from there over the weekend he shoots 67, 66, and finishes in 4th place. I mean, it was a fabulous little run, and his major streak of the back-to-back wins coming off the British and the PGA Championships ended, and he did not close out his career Grand Slam like he had hoped, but it's still got to give him a little momentum, and I expect big things from him this summer.
So I think we have to classify Tiger as the biggest surprise. What or who was the biggest disappointment?
I have to say, Jason Day was a big disappointment for me. I had picked him as an absolute lock. I thought this was his year. Shot 67 on Thursday and just completely fell apart after that and finished T28th, totally out of contention. Other guys, Brandt, Snedeker missed the cut. Luke Donald missed the cut. So a couple of pretty big names there who've contended at Augusta before. Overall, most of the big names at least made the weekend, but I would say those are the biggest disappointments. What
about Bubba's game? He never really was in serious contention at all.
Yeah, and actually that's another good one to point out. I'm glad you brought him up. He looked a little off. He not only was not putting well, but even particularly with his driver where he, obviously he's won 2 of the last 3 Masters up until this year. He typically has that patented cut shot down so well, and he was just off his game. I watched a lot of driver swings where he had some really funky follow-throughs, and he just seemed to be out of sorts. I don't know what it was, but he clearly wasn't his normal self. So definitely out of whack there too. Another guy to mention, I guess, would be Adam Scott, who had switched to the long putter, and that did no good whatsoever. And on Sunday, he actually made a 7 on the par 3 12th hole, quadruple bogey. Rallied back a little bit, still to shoot a couple over, but another just a poor performance from Adam too.
I want to go back to Bubba for a second, Joel, because a lot was made this week, or last week, I should say, leading into the tournament about this poll of PGA players coming out, and Bubba is one of the most disliked guys on tour. And ordinarily, you'd think these guys don't care. Bubba seems like the kind of guy that cares, and based on his comments in the aftermath, it seemed to bother him.
Yeah. Initially, Bubba, I watched the press conference on Wednesday right before the tournament, right after those comments came out. And you could tell he was trying to play it down, but a guy like Bubba, that's definitely going to get under his skin. There's no question about it. And I'm not surprised to hear those comments, by the way.
Yeah.
This Bubba, unfortunately, we've seen it too many times where he's yelling at his caddy and like right on camera, right in the middle of contention, and so many other things. He's just, he's a fabulous guy to watch. He's very talented. He's just maybe not necessarily the best person, not the best guy to cheer for in the world. Definitely appeared to affect him, and maybe that's part of the reason for his poor play, because this year he certainly hasn't had the world-beating year, but he's had a pretty good year. He's contended in a couple tourneys and seemed like he'd be in good form heading in, and yeah, he did not have a good week.
So another tradition now, of course, the week after the Masters, you always find the PGA Tour in Harbour Town, and you point out something very interesting in the blog this week, Joel, about how popular this tournament and this course is with the players on the tour.
Yeah, so you would think coming off of Augusta last week, it's Augusta National. It's the best course in the world, and certainly on tour, and that's a fact. In fact, if you go a couple years back, there was a Golf Digest poll among PGA Tour players, and they asked them they basically just had them rank courses on the PGA Tour, and keep in mind this does not count U.S. Open or British or PGA tournaments because those rotate. Number 1 was Augusta National. Number 2, Harbour Town, this week's tournament, and that's eye-opening because there's so many other great venues: Pebble Beach, Riviera, Torrey Pines, and so the list goes on and on. A lot of those are ranked highly, but number 2, Harbour Town, that's fabulous, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact it's not overly long. You don't need to bash driver in every single hole. In fact, if you look at the winners list at Harbour Town the last 12 years. Other than Davis Love, like a little over a decade ago, there's no long hitters in the list. You have Jim Furyk, Graham McDowell, Brandt Snedeker, Boo Weekley, Aaron Baddeley, just shot makers. It's kind of a breath of fresh air, and it's a Pete Dye course, so there's a few quirks to it, but it's definitely one of Pete Dye's gems. And that's the reason why there's a lot of guys who played last week who are probably pretty exhausted from the first major of the season, but that are playing this week because they love this venue.
And the two guys you immediately put the spotlight on were Webb Simpson and Brandt Snedeker.
Yeah, Snedeker being a past champ, missed the cut at the Masters last week, which was definitely disappointing, but I think he'll right the ship this week. And then Webb, who lost in a playoff here a couple years ago to actually Graham McDowell, was in good form, didn't have the best Masters, but Webb's a guy who just in deep fields, other than his U.S. Open victory a couple years ago, hasn't had a lot of success. But in tournaments like this, he's primed and ready. So I like both Webb and Brandt this week.
Did we learn anything about this season going forward from what happened at the Masters, or are we just kind of saying that was the 1 week that it was and there's no ramifications moving forward?
I think if one thing we learned is, first of all, that Jordan Spieth is here to stay.
Yeah.
I certainly don't think what we saw was a flash in the pan or anything. He's just been trending upward ever since he turned pro. I mean, he won at the John Deere. He contended a lot of other tournaments. He didn't really actually regularly start winning. Now this is only his 3rd win, but for a guy to go first, second, first, and for that last first to be at the Masters, wire-to-wire fashion, it's pretty obvious that he's going to be a superstar. It's awesome, and it's great for USA Ryder Cup golf, I'll tell you that. So I think it just tells us it's going to be a fun year, and also in addition to that, guys like Dustin Johnson, Phil Mickelson, guys who are polarizing and extra fun to watch too, to be in contention. I think that's a good sign. And even Tiger, who had made a little bit of a run. I mean, if he's healthy, I would not be surprised at all in the next 2 to 3 months to see him, deep into contention over the weekend. The question mark will be when he plays next.